Hello and welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. Back in July of 2022, Steamforged Games acquired Rivet Wars, a cool mini-or-not property first published in 2014 but long out of print. Steamforged Games tweaked the system and relaunched it on Kickstarter as Rivet Wars Reloaded, which successfully funded in September 2022. Fast forward to now, and with most of the Kickstarter pledges fulfilled, Rivet Wars Reloaded is about to hit general retail. I've been sent a review copy to check out for myself. Admittedly, I had never played Rivet Wars before. I had always enjoyed the aesthetic, and I was interested in an accessible miniature skirmish game that I could potentially play with my kids, but for one reason or another, I never got around to giving it a try. So I was very excited to get this new addition to the table. And I really like it. It's not without flaws, but it's a solid game with streamlined rules and beautiful miniatures. It's just my sort of thing. Before we take a closer look, I should point out the player count for this game. It is listed as being for 1 to 4 players. That is true enough, but the core experience is a 2-player skirmish game. There are alternative rules included for playing solo against an AI opponent, and rules for team games with multiple players controlling allied forces, but at its heart, this is a classic 2-player game. However, the inclusion of those different game modes is just one example of the generosity of this core box. It is absolutely packed. You get 2 full forces with a varied selection of units and heroes, 22 miniatures for the allies and 22 miniatures for the Blight. And these aren't simple starter armies that you are going to feel like you need to immediately build out with expansions. Although yes, there are plenty of expansions, including one for a 3rd faction. There are even rules and stat cards included for using units from rival factions in your own army. You can use these to represent stolen plans during game setup, or to play a rule where you can capture rival units and then bring them in on your own team as reinforcements. The only thing you are really missing in the starter box is an aerial unit of some kind, but I think that is a fair compromise to keep the core set at a feasible price point while also ensuring the experience is more accessible. And the miniatures themselves are superb. They are pre-assembled, based and coloured out of the box, so you can have your first game up and running in no time at all. And they have a delightful cute diesel punk style that I think a lot of painters are going to find appealing. The more family-friendly veneer could also encourage younger gamers to roll some dice. I especially like the plugs. These are heroes and turrets that you literally plug into other miniatures. It's incredibly slick and makes it immediately obvious which units have been upgraded. My one complaint is that some of the miniatures look very similar from a distance. For example, here it's not immediately apparent which of these models are the basic infantry units and which one is the hero. So there is a great selection of miniatures, and you are spoiled for choice in how to use them, as the core set includes a tutorial scenario, 2 standalone scenarios for pick-up play, a 6-scenario campaign, and guidelines for creating your own scenarios, all of which can be played using solo, co-op, 1v1 and team rules. To get your first game underway, choose a faction, pick a scenario, and create your battlefield using the included game tiles. It's important to note that game tiles are divided into large areas for measuring movement and range. However, within each area there are 4 squares, and these are used to determine how many units can fit in that area. Units will either occupy a single square, 2 squares, or in the case of the gigantic MT1 ostrich, all 4 squares. Also note, in most cases you don't start the game with any units in play. Furthermore, unlike some games such as Masters of the Universe Battleground and Kill Team, you don't have to build a force using points before battle commences. Instead, during gameplay you will gain resources that you can spend to bring any units into play. This means you will never lose a game due to bad pre-game choices, and you always have the option to adapt to the current state of play, funneling your resources into producing the right units at the right time. This creates a much more fluid, dynamic style of gameplay where you have to think fast and there is always a way back into the fight. But if players are constantly bringing new units into play, how do you win? Each scenario presents 2 win conditions. Firstly, there is a victory point goal. Victory points are gained by claiming strategic objectives or destroying powerful rival units. The first player to gain enough victory points wins. Secondly, each scenario presents a number of side missions. At the start of the game these are locked, but at the end of each turn one mission is unlocked, and from then on a player can try to meet the criteria for completing it. A player who completes 3 missions instantly wins. The gameplay itself is exceptionally simple. In fact, other than memorising the special abilities for your units, there is nothing too taxing here at all. Each battle plays out in rounds, and in each round the first player will complete a full turn, and then the second player will complete a full turn. Once both players have taken a turn, assuming nobody has won, the next mission card is unlocked and a new round begins. A player's turn is further broken down into 5 phases. First, there is the control phase, where you draw an action card. You can have a maximum of 3 of these in your hand, and they offer a variety of one-time bonuses you can employ during a particular phase. For example, you can send out this carrier pigeon during your deployment phase to draw 2 more action cards. Or you can use the command "Let's try that again" to re-roll all the dice you rolled for a single attack in your combat phase. After drawing a card, you then place one of your flag tokens on each strategic objective you are currently holding that doesn't already have a flag token. The objectives are easy to identify as they have a star symbol on them. Next is the deployment phase. Each scenario lists a number of deployment points and rivets that you will receive each turn in this phase, and you can use those resources to purchase new units. For example, if you had 3 deployment points and 1 rivet, you could use them to purchase 3 riflemen for 1 point each, or you could purchase 1 rifleman for 1 point and the awesome rocket cycle for 2 points, or you could use all 3 deployment points and your rivet to deploy the M2 Wolverine. Unused deployment points are discarded at the end of the phase, so it makes sense to use them. But rivets, which are only required for the most powerful units, can be saved up over multiple turns. Hold your nerve and save your rivets for long enough, and you will be able to deploy the most deadly tools of war, such as the MT1 Ostrich or the Sturmpanzer. And I have to say, this is rather brilliant. I love not being locked into a particular army list. I like being able to deploy new troops depending on how the battle is going, and there is a lovely tension in balancing using your rivets early for moderately powerful units or saving them up for the big tanks. Also, this makes it very easy to add new units when you buy expansions. Those new units just become additional options to drop on the table when you need them, rather than being something you have to work into a rigid army list. Anyway, after purchasing units, you can place them on any of your deployment zones unless they are plugs, in which case you can add them to any valid unit within friendly territory as indicated on the scenario map. Next is the combat phase, and yes, combat happens before movement. In the combat phase you will select one area at a time, attacking with each unit within that area. To do this you choose an area within range of the attacking unit. There is no line of sight, so any target within range is valid. But do note, measuring distance is a little bit clunky and it takes a minute to get used to. This is because when you are measuring the distance, you count through adjacent areas, and while all areas next to each other, orthogonally or diagonally, are classed as being adjacent, you can only count diagonally once. That makes my head hurt just trying to put it into words, so here's the diagram from the rules, which does a decent job of illustrating the concept. Having selected an area, you have to figure out which unit in that area you are eligible to target. For this, you reference your enemy targeting card, oriented to face the enemy battle line. You must target the unit in the lowest numbered space, so in this example we would have to target the Panzerfaust, even though we would much prefer to target the mono-wheel Dragoon. Each unit has 1 or more attack profiles, which define how many times they can attack, whether their attacks have a special rule such as blast or accurate, and how many dice they roll based on the armor statistic of the target. Our M2 Wolverine, for example, makes 1 attack, rolling 2 dice against units with an armor of 1, 2 or 3, but just 1 dice against units with an armor of 4. Meanwhile, the MT1 Ostrich has several weapons, so can make 2 attacks, the first of which has the blast special rule, which means it targets every unit in the area. If the Ostrich had a plug, such as Sergeant Rolino, they would also get any additional attacks that plug provides. When the dice are rolled, normally a 5 or 6 is considered a hit, and if at least 1 hit is rolled, the target takes a single wound. Unless a special rule states otherwise, the target will take a maximum of 1 wound per attack. While this is often enough to destroy weaker units, the most powerful units have multiple wounds, and it will take a lot of concentrated fire to take them down. Overall, combat is quick and easy to resolve once you are into the swing of it. You just need to make sure you take note of special abilities on attack profiles and any other special abilities listed at the bottom of your unit cards, which are explained in full on the reverse. Pay particular note to special abilities labelled as actions, as you can perform these instead of making an attack. Also watch out for the ability Rapid Assault, which is one of the only ways you can move a unit before combat. And speaking of movement, after the combat phase you have the movement phase, where you can move each unit in your force up to its maximum move value. Again, distance is measured in areas, and you are only allowed to measure diagonally once per movement. While moving, you are allowed to reposition units within areas, which is important to ensure your opponent cannot easily target your strongest pieces. Finally, there is a wrap-up phase, where you remove any enemy flags from objectives you are now holding, and then score 1 victory point for each objective containing one of your units or one of your flags. You can then check for victory before continuing the game. And these are the core elements of gameplay. Of course, there is more to it: special terrain like trenches and bunkers that benefit infantry, barbed wire, mines, tank traps, and each scenario will have its own unique rules. But it is, for the most part, a very simple, easily accessible, and importantly, engaging game. It's fast, fluid, and while you need the luck of the dice to take out your targets, clever deployment, good use of your reinforcements, playing action cards at the right time, and making the most efficient use of your unit's special abilities goes a long way. After all, you are playing for victory points and for the completion of missions, and often that won't require you to kill the enemy at all. All that said, there are elements of the game I'm not totally sold on. For a start, it is using the I go you go system for activation. I guess there's nothing inherently wrong with that, and it does work for this game, which is a very simple affair, but it can feel a bit stodgy. And if you get to the situation where there are a lot of units on the battlefield, one player can spend a fair amount of time twiddling their thumbs. Especially as this game doesn't make use of opposed dice rolling. Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, and it does keep the game streamlined, but opposed dice rolling keeps both players fully engaged at all times. In Rivet Wars, once you have moved and positioned your troops, there really isn't much else you can do except cross your fingers and hope your opponent flubs their dice rolls. I'm also rather torn on the enemy targeting system. While I think it's a rather neat way of incorporating some interesting positional play into the system without overcomplicating the whole process, it does feel a little unnatural that if I am faced with 2 units, I always have to target the one on my right before I can target the one on my left. There is also a certain amount of sloppiness in the components and in the rules. Nothing that really impacts on the gameplay, but the kind of thing that I do raise an eyebrow at because it could have been avoided. For example, units have an armor value, which is represented with a shield icon. This determines how many dice an opponent rolls when they attack them. During a game, units can gain shield tokens which have the same shield icon on them. However, this token does not increase the unit's armor. Instead, if the unit takes a hit, you remove the shield token instead of applying a wound. Using the same icon for 2 completely different purposes is baffling. Another example. The game doesn't include any tokens for tracking unit activations, so if you are moving a lot of units, you have to be sure you don't end up moving any of them more than once. There are generic marker tokens you could use, but there are only a few of them, and they are often being used for some other purpose. Something else that immediately stood out to me was that within the rules themselves, the round sequence is completely misrepresented in one instance. At first, the rules state that from the second round onwards, at the start of the new round, you unlock the next mission card. Later, on the very same page, the rules state that you unlock the next mission at the end of each round. In play, I don't think that functionally makes any difference at all, but I can't understand how within a single page, the rules present 2 completely different round structures. And as a final example, in the tutorial scenario, the rules state that the allied player can deploy an M3 Wolverine for free. There is no M3 Wolverine. There is an M2 Wolverine and an M3 vertical tank. It's pretty obvious which unit they mean, but it is in the tutorial, which is the one place you really need to be absolutely precise with everything to successfully onboard your brand new players. Again though, I must stress these elements of, for want of a better word, sloppiness are fairly minor, and they really don't impact significantly on the gameplay, which is tight, brisk, and a lot of fun. And that is ultimately what this game is: fun. It is certainly not a deep game, it's not trying to be, but it's a good stab at a lightweight, fast-paced skirmish game that, for the most part, does what it wants to do well, and provides enough material in the core box to keep you playing for a while. I don't have any expansions, so I don't know if they add significant depth or simply broaden the options you have at your disposal, but if the core set is anything to go by, simply having more options could be enough. Before I sign off, I should also briefly mention the solo and co-op rules, which pit one or more players against an AI opponent. When I want to play a game like this solo, I tend to partition my brain. I control both sides and try to play to the best of my abilities, usually driven by some kind of narrative thinking, and then I just see how things turn out. This is particularly easy for Rivet Wars, as there is limited hidden information. But I know that isn't going to appeal to a lot of people, so a robust solo experience is a really solid inclusion. And this one is okay. Without going into a lot of details, the AI opponent draws 2 cards at the beginning of its turn. The first is a trait card, which provides some kind of buff or special rule for the turn. The second is a deployment order, which defines what kind of units the AI will add to the battlefield. Between these cards and a simple system for identifying targets, the AI does a decent job of running itself, although you may still find yourself in a position where you will have to make a decision, choosing the option that is most detrimental to you. That's all fine, but for me, this is the kind of game that really benefits from having a real-life opponent, someone you can meet head-to-head across the battlefield, someone you can mock when you take out their heroes, or curse when they wrestle an objective from your grasp. That is what is going to take this game up a gear, and encourage you to reload again and again. Rivet Wars Reloaded hits retail on the 26th of September 2025, and you will find a link to the Steamforged Games web store in the video description below. But that is it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like this video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.